October 1962. 13 days from possible nuclear war. President Kennedy's advisors are staring at photographs of Soviet missile sites in Cuba, trying to answer one question. How ready are these missiles really? Much of their confidence in the answer traces back to technical documents handed over more than a year earlier by a Soviet officer named Oleg Penkovsky, a man Soviet counterintelligence was already closing in on by the time the crisis began. Every other story in this series has been about a Western blind spot, a system that trusted the wrong person or believed its own cover story too long. This one runs the other way. Penkovsky handed the West exactly what it needed, at exactly the moment it needed it. But his usefulness and his exposure were moving on the same clock, and neither side fully controlled how fast that clock was ticking. Oleg Penkovsky was a colonel in the GRU, Soviet military intelligence, with genuine access to missile technology, troop readiness assessments, and strategic planning documents. On paper, he was exactly the kind of loyal, high-ranking officer Soviet intelligence trusted without question. By 1960, he had quietly decided to offer that access to the West instead. His exact motives are still debated. He later described disillusionment with Soviet leadership and genuine fear of where Khrushchev's brinkmanship might lead, particularly after witnessing internal military assessments he considered reckless. Others have pointed to a stalled career and a taste for the privileges Western contact might bring. Most historians now think it was some mixture of both. Conviction mattered, but so did ambition, and a lifestyle he no longer wanted to give up. Getting Western intelligence to actually trust him took real effort. After the Cambridge Five and other embarrassments, both the CIA and MI6 were wary of unsolicited Soviet contacts, who might be exactly what they claimed, or might be a setup. Penkovsky eventually made contact through British and American businessmen with legitimate reasons to travel to Moscow. Most notably, a British contact named Greville Wynne. Wynne was not a career intelligence officer. He was a legitimate British trade representative who agreed, after being approached by MI6, to act as a courier and cover contact, a civilian who now carried enormous risk on every trip to Moscow, with a far smaller safety net than a trained case officer would have had. The most productive sessions didn't happen in Moscow at all. As part of official Soviet trade delegations, Penkovsky travelled to London and Paris in 1961, where CIA and MI6 officers debriefed him directly across more than a dozen extended sessions, an almost unheard-of luxury in espionage, conducted in hotel rooms under the cover of ordinary diplomatic travel. These sessions sometimes ran for hours at a stretch, officers on both sides working in shifts, aware that this kind of sustained, face-to-face access to a source this highly placed might never happen again. Over these sessions, Penkovsky delivered an extraordinary volume of material, later given the code names Ironbark and Chickadee inside Western intelligence. Thousands of pages of technical documents, including detailed specifications on Soviet missile systems, their range, their accuracy, and, critically, how long they took to become operational once deployed. He photographed documents inside Soviet military facilities using a miniature camera, at direct personal risk every time. That last detail, how long the missiles took to become operational, turned out to matter enormously. When American U-2 flights photographed missile sites being built in Cuba in October 1962, the immediate question wasn't just what the Soviets had sent, but how close those weapons were to being launch-ready. Penkovsky's technical documents gave American analysts a working answer, shaping how much time Kennedy believed he had to negotiate rather than strike first. By the time the missile crisis was unfolding in October 1962, Penkovsky had already been under Soviet surveillance for weeks. He was arrested on October 22nd, the same day President Kennedy publicly announced the crisis to the world. His most consequential information had already been delivered. His usefulness to the West and his freedom ran out at almost the same moment. Soviet counterintelligence had been tightening its focus on Penkovsky for months before his arrest. Investigators later pointed to patterns in his travel and his contact movements, along with physical surveillance around dead drop locations in Moscow. Some historians emphasize Western tradecraft mistakes, meetings and signal sites that fell into predictable patterns, as much as any single Soviet breakthrough in isolating him. His apartment was eventually searched and fitted with surveillance equipment before his arrest, giving investigators direct confirmation of what they had already begun to suspect. Greville Wynne, the British businessman who had helped establish and maintain contact with Penkovsky, was arrested shortly afterward while travelling in Hungary. Both men were brought back to Moscow to stand trial together, a rare instance of a Western intelligence contact being captured and tried alongside the Soviet source he had helped run. The trial in May 1963 was conducted largely for public consumption, presenting Penkovsky's espionage as a personal moral failing, rather than acknowledging how much material he'd actually compromised. He was sentenced to death. Wynne received an 8-year prison term and was later exchanged in a prisoner swap, following the same pattern of quiet Cold War trades as the Powers Able exchange years earlier. Penkovsky was executed shortly after the trial, according to official Soviet accounts, though the exact circumstances of his death were never independently confirmed to the West, and unverified rumours about the method have circulated for decades since. What is certain is that he never saw how his own information was ultimately used. In the years since, historians have debated exactly how much credit Penkovsky's documents deserve for the missile crisis's peaceful resolution. American analysts already suspected some of what his material confirmed, and Kennedy's decisions depended on many sources beyond a single spy, including the U-2 photography itself. But the consensus that has held up is that his technical detail gave decision-makers a level of confidence about Soviet capabilities they would not otherwise have had, at the exact moment that confidence mattered most, when a wrong guess could have pushed both sides toward a strike neither wanted. The Cambridge Five, the U-2 incident, and the Berlin Tunnel are all stories about institutions trusting something they shouldn't have. Penkovsky's story is the uncomfortable mirror image. A single source can hand over exactly the right information at exactly the right time and still lose the race against his own exposure. The intelligence worked. The man providing it ran out of time before anyone could protect him. Next time, 2 rival tunnel operations, a captured spy plane pilot, and a defector all collide in one of the strangest prisoner exchanges of the entire Cold War. On a bridge, neither side trusted the other to cross first.